Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today, your farm is being infested with poisonous toads. You'll be expanding your company and preventing the toads from destroying your fields. This is actually based on the real-life events around the poisonous cane toads that took place in the 1930s in Australia and it still continues today. Queensland is a tile-laying game for 1 to 4 players. It takes 45 minutes to play, is for ages 10 and up, and published by 999 Games. Today, we'll be doing a rule school where I'll teach you how to set up and play the game so that you don't have to read the rulebook yourself. Now I've placed timestamps just below me in the description of this video just in case you want to jump to a specific section of the rules. Let's get started. Queensland is a tile-laying game where your farm is being infested by poisonous toads. You'll be expanding your company and preventing the toads from destroying your fields. On your turn, you'll be drafting a tile from the market and placing them adjacent to your own fields. You'll need to match the patterns on your adjacent farm tiles, but you have the flexibility to rotate tiles as you see fit. Like sugarcane fields, wheat fields, or soil. Watch out, because not only will you be adding toads to your placed tile depending on which one you took, but all of your toads in that farm will also be moving according to that tile's movement arrow. You're trying to move them all to the pond where they end their movement for good, but more importantly, will gain you points and be removed if you have 5 or more in a pond. You're also trying to collect the different farm traits like cows, scarecrows, and tractors, because the more you have of each, the more points you'll get for those at the end of the game. You're also trying to have the least amount of toads and a large sugarcane field and wheat field, as those will give you big points at the end as well. There's also a solo mode with 3 levels of play, including scenarios to try and complete. I'm going to teach you how to set up and play a 2 to 4 player game of Queensland. To first set up, place the compass board in the middle of the table. Next, place the market board just below that, making sure you have the side that has 2 or more players like this. Next, you'll separate out the tiles that are for specific player colors. On the back of them, you'll see red, blue, yellow, and purple. There's also a scoring marker on each of those colors. Each player will select a color. They'll take all 4 of these tiles and the scoring marker. If you're playing with less than 4 players, the ones not used can be placed back in the box. Next, each player will take their 4 tiles and they'll place them face up like this, and then they have to go A, B, C, D, just in this orientation, going left to right and top to bottom. Now you must make sure that your tiles are facing one of the 4 cardinal directions shown here. So if we were sitting on this side of the board, they would be straight edged with this and perpendicular right there to north. Now this blue player might be sitting to the right of this board, and so they're facing that way. You always need to make sure that you are sort of a 90 degree to this board. You cannot be diagonally or 45 degrees like this. Everyone has to have their tiles 90 degrees to one of the sides of the board. Each player will place their score marker right on the 0 spot just above north on the board. Next, you'll find all of the farm tiles. These are the back sides. You'll shuffle them all and you'll put them in any number of piles like this. Then you'll draw 3 of these tiles and place them face up on this spot of the board. So it might look something like this. The orientation of these different tiles does not matter at this point. You'll place a supply of toads off to the side where everyone can reach them. You'll also place these scoring tokens off to the side. These will help you remember if you have gotten 50 or 100 points throughout the game. They're double-sided. You'll give each player a player aid, and you'll want to put it on the side that has 2 or more players, as shown here, and then you'll randomly determine the starting player. The objective of the game is to have the most points in the end, and you're going to be scoring points during the game and at the end game, and we'll go over all of this throughout the video. The game is played in clockwise order. On your turn, you're going to be the active player. All other players will be the passive players. When you're the active player, you'll walk through 4 phases of your turn. Now the first phase of your turn is placing a tile. On the market board, there are going to be 3 tiles like this. You're simply going to pick one of these and you're going to get ready to place it in your farm. Now when placing the tile, you must add it adjacent to one of the tiles already in your farm. You cannot place it out in the middle of nowhere. You also cannot place it so it's just diagonally like this. It has to be actually adjacent. You'll also need to match the type of landscape. For example, this is soil and this here are sugarcane fields. I could not do this because this does not match that, which is also the same reason why I couldn't do this and I could not do this. However, I could do something like this or something like this. You can freely rotate it. I could even do something like this. So you're free to rotate it as long as things match and it's adjacent to another tile. So maybe I place it like this. Now you might notice tiles have farm traits. They're going to be either tractors or cows or scarecrows. These are going to help you score points with set collection later that I'll go over. Then you must add and move toads. This is the second phase of your turn. Now depending on where you took the tile from, in this case I took it from here, I would take 1 toad from the supply. If I had taken this tile, 2 toads. If I had taken this tile, 3 toads. Now you first must add that toad or toads to the tile that you just placed. If at some point this supply is completely empty, you take as many toads as you can given the tile that you took. Then when moving toads, you're going to look at the arrow that is on the tile that you just placed, and there's different types of arrows. This is a single arrow, and if it's red like this, it means just the active player is going to move it, which means you. And in this case, it's facing to the south. And that's because where I'm oriented to the compass board, this is to the south. Notice this is pointing to the south because south is pointing here. However, if I had been sitting to the east of the board, then this would have been east because this is pointing to the east and this shows you that direction. And it's very important to say the direction, not up, down, left, or right. Actually say the cardinal direction because as I'll show you in a moment, other players might have the ability to move toads. We'll go over that in just a moment. Now when moving toads, you're going to move all of your toads, including the one you just placed. Now at the beginning of the game, I just have this single toad. Now when moving toads, they never move off the farm. So even though this is going to be moving south, there's nothing here, so it won't move there. It will just stay put. However, instead, let's say I placed this tile here. I would have been moving this toad north, and all toads, in this case there's just 1. And you always move it just 1 tile. So in this case, all my toads, in this case it's just 1, we just move to 1 tile. It doesn't matter exactly where it is on the tile for now, just you can place it right there. So why would I place it here when it can't move? Let's talk about what you're trying to do with these toads because there are ways to score it. Let's just assume it's our next turn. And we take a tile and we place it just like this. Now look at it, matches the wheat fields here and it matches the soil here, so that's a legal placement. Now this is pointing 2 arrows to the west. It is a double movement. So first we'll place the toad on the tile and then we'll go west 2 movements. This is going to go 1, 2. Now remember, if it was going to go off, if this tile wasn't here, it would just stop as far as it would go because it never moves off your farm. But in this case, it actually moves 2. Now you're supposed to do this for all of your toads. Now in this case, 2 to the west. Now in this case, I'm going to go here, and anytime a toad gets onto a pond, where they're moving like this, now theoretically it was supposed to move 1 more, but anytime a toad gets to a pond, it no longer moves. And anytime you actually place a tile with a pond, when you place the toad in that pond, it also never moves. So toads in ponds never move. Now keep in mind, even though this one had to stop, it does not change the movements of any other toads. Each toad's movement is looked at individually. Now, this is going to allow you to score things that I'll go over in just a moment, but let me go over one other type of arrow you might come across. Because let's say it's our next turn, and we placed this tile. Now, we will take a toad and we'll place it in it, and because, remember, it is on a pond, it will not move, but this arrow is different. Notice it's blue instead of red like the other arrows, and it has pictures of other players. What this means is that while you're moving your toads, the other players, who are known as the passive players, they all simultaneously can also move toads on their farm. Now remember, this means that the active player must move all of their toads, in this case it's 1 tile, to the east. Now this one didn't move because it was placed in a pond. This one's already in a pond so it doesn't move. This one will move like this. Now remember, all the other passive players simultaneously have 2 choices. They can either not move any toads, or they have to move all their toads in the same cardinal direction. Now all of the passive players, remember, simultaneously have 2 options. They can not move any of their toads, keep them all the same, or they have to move all of their toads, and it has to be to the cardinal direction that the tile was just placed by the active player. Now if you remember, it was east. And this player happens to be sitting in this orientation to the board, so they either are going to move no toads or all of them. Remember, toads in the ponds never move, so they can decide to move this one or not because that's the only one left that can move, and the tile that the active player was facing east, so they could decide to move this here and stack these toads on ponds, which is what you do when you have more than 1 toad there. Now let's say this is what the blue player's farm looked like. Now remember, the active player first placed a tile, then they added and moved toads, but in this case, the other players, who are the passive players, could decide to move all of none of their toads. Now let's say they already had 4 toads in this pond. Now when they decide to move this, here they have 5. If you have 5 or more, by the way, after everyone adds or moves toads, it's going to go to the scoring phase. Now, regardless of who the passive player is, if you have 5 or more toads in a single pond, you're going to score. Now, if you have 5 toads exactly, you're going to score 5 points. But if it contained 6 or more toads, you're only going to get 3 points. Well, how are you going to get more? Well, all your toads might be moving, and so you might get multiples of them in the same pond on the same turn, getting you more than 5 toads in a pond. Now, this is shown on your player aid. 5 toads in a pond, 5 points. More than 5 toads in a pond, 3 points. Now, after you do that, you're going to take all of the toads that were in that pond and you're going to put them back in the supply. Now, keep in mind, it's possible for you to score more than one pond on the same turn. After the scoring phase, you go to refilling the market. First, you're going to slide all tiles to the right, as shown by these. Now, in this case, this tile was taken, so everything is already to the right. You'll then take a tile that has not been flipped yet, and you will place it in the market board. And always going to be on the furthest space to the left. And remember, the orientation does not matter. But let's say in that next player's turn, when they placed the tile, they took it from here. After all the phases, which is placing the tile, then adding moving toads, and then scoring, when they refill the market, again, you're always going to slide all the way to the right, and then replace it here. Turns continue like this in clockwise order until you can no longer refill the market. For example, this tile was placed this turn, and there's no tiles left. So there's only 2 tiles here. At this point, you just take these 2 tiles off, you place them back in the box, just to make sure that nobody else is taking a turn, and then you go to final scoring. Then you're going to look at the bottom half of your player aid to walk yourself through the scoring. First is going to be who has the fewest amount of toads still in their farm. And whoever has the fewest is going to get 3 points. Now, the players, if there's more than one, they would all get 3 points unless all the players have the same number of toads. And at that point, it's the player with the fewest tiles containing toads would score the 3 points. And if all players have no toads, all players score the points. Now next, you're going to look and see who has the most toads. So the players with the most toads, they actually lose 3 points. Most toads lose 3 points. Now a minimum of 1 toad is required this way. However, if all players have the same number of toads, the players with the most tiles containing toads lose 3 points. Then all players that have tiles with toads on them will remove every tile that has a toad on them. So you're going to remove the tile from your farm and any toads that are on it. Now place these removed tiles with the toads off to the side so everyone can see how many tiles and toads each player removed. Now removed tiles might cause gaps in your farm, and that's going to affect your final scoring moving forward. So here, the circled farm is part of your farm for final scoring, and all the tiles that were removed just below that are not part of your scoring at all. Next, all players are going to score points for their single largest sugarcane field that is completed in their farm, and they're going to get 2 points per tile. So let's say this was that player's largest completed one. Now remember, it has to be completed. If it was like this, it's not completed. It has to have that sort of black outline and be completed like that. And it's 2 points per tile. So it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. However, let's say this was the largest one that was completed. Now, notice that this tile actually has 2 sections of this. In this case, it actually gets counted twice. So let's go clockwise from here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 points for that one. Now remember, you're only scoring your single largest completed sugarcane field. Then you do the same exact thing for your single largest completed wheat field, except they're only 1 point per tile instead of 2 like they were for the sugarcane fields. Next, you're going to score sets of the different farm traits. So we have cows, scarecrows, and tractors. Now, if you're playing with 2 players, you'll use this part of the player aid. If you're playing with 3 or more players, you'll be using this. Now, so for each of these, you're going to count how many they are on your farm. That's the numbers here. And then you'll get a corresponding amount of points of what the arrow is pointing to. So let's say these were the only 4 cows in my farm. I'm playing with 4 players, so I would get 4 points. And you would do this for your entire farm for each of the 3 different traits. And then you'd score 1 point for each remaining pond in your farm. And at this point, whoever has the most points is the winner. If it's tied, the tied players that have the most starting tiles of their color still in their farm would win. Now if it's still tied, from those players, the one that has the largest completed wheat field would win. If it's still tied, the one with the largest completed cane field would win. And if it's still tied, you rejoice in your shared victory. Now there is a solo game. There's a separate rules leaflet for that I will let you explore on your own. And remember, you're going to be using different sides of the boards and player aids for that. Well, I hope this helped you dive right into Queensland faster than you normally would if you had to read the rulebook yourself. Now, if you have further questions about the rules, I placed a link below me in the description of this video, and that's the best place to ask them since I'll be notified, but so will 999 Games.